With the latest agriculture news from across the state and nation, it's time for the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. Here's your host, Sabrina Halvorson.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning on the AgNet News Hour. Coming up later, why California mandarins are a strong, vibrant fruit for the industry. We'll have more on that. But to start the day today, the right tractor tires can be one of the most overlooked assets on a farm. Chad Smith has the report.
Finding a tractor with enough horsepower and the latest features in technology is often the priority. However, farmers often overlook a critical asset, and that's their tires. Bill Dervidge, a farm tire expert from Firestone Ag, says don't overlook your tires because the right ones help your bottom line.
The most important part about the tire is that it's the only thing that transmits the horsepower of your tractor or your piece of equipment to the ground. So all of the efficiency you get out of the high horsepower equipment only as good as the tires that you put on your tractor or your combine or whatever piece of equipment. Also, what's the only thing that's carrying the load of your equipment? As you increase your payloads, as you increase the size of the tractor to get more ballast, to get more horsepower, you're pulling bigger implements, bigger tools, things get heavier and heavier, and the tires are really what carries all of that weight. You're also going to have a tire that's going to generate a giant footprint to protect your soil from compaction.
He talks about the most important things to consider when choosing the right tires.
The first thing to consider is the type of equipment and the size of the equipment. So you want to make sure you're matching the right tire design to the application and having the right tire sizes. Another thing is what's the row size you're going down. Are you going down narrow rows, wide rows? Are you trying to stay in between the rows or go over top the rows of the crops? Another thing on that end is the machine clearances and the machine width overall. So you're trying to stay within a certain width during transport. Are you trying to fit it in a certain spot of the barn or get within a narrow barn door restriction? If you're also looking at the size, what rims do you have? So you want to make sure you have the right load capacity there. And then are you using this on the road a lot? Are you using it in the field primarily? Is it heavy usage, light duty usage?
When looking at tire options, he talks about some of the design features to focus on.
I think the first thing to consider is your casing design. Are you looking for a bias construction tire or a radial construction tire or a very high technology radial that features IF and VF technology? Historically, in a bias casing, you just have crisscrossing body plies in the carcass of the tire. It's going to be rather stiff. It's going to generate a smaller footprint, but generally it's usually a cheaper tire option. Radial is kind of the next generation of technology that really allows the footprint to grow and allows the tire to squat more and also increases your load carrying capacity at some lower inflation pressures. IF tires allow 20% more load carrying capacity at the same inflation pressure versus a VF is 40% more. Another thing to consider then would really be your tread design. Generally speaking, for like a tractor type drive tire, there's R1 tires, R1W tires, and R2 tires. I think you just kind of need to evaluate what performance are you really looking for out of your tires.
He also says durability and minimizing downtime are other important factors in evaluating farm tires. If you have more questions or need help picking the right tires, talk to your local Firestone Ag dealer or attend a Firestone Ag field clinic. Chad Smith reporting.
USDA's planted acres number for durum wheat are higher than many had expected. Gary Crawford has details.
Back in March, growers of durum wheat indicated to USDA that they intended to plant 2,030,000 acres of durum wheat this year, or 22% more than this last season. Even then, though, that was more than many analysts had expected.
Not only were intentions above the trade range in March, the actual plantings is above the intentions from March as well, too.
140,000 acres above intentions, USDA Chief Economist Seth Meyer, and indeed USDA is currently projecting actual durum wheat acreage this year to be almost 2.2 million acres.
And a lot of that's going to be out of the number 1 and 2 states of Montana and North Dakota, where you see, production increases of acreage increases of more than 20% year over year in both states.
And nationally, the increase in durum wheat acreage from last year, 29%. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
You're listening to the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. In today's National Spotlight, the University of Illinois crop budgets have been updated. Todd Gleason has more on the changes and what farmer income might look like for this year and for last year, too.
Let's start with the changes in last year's budget. University of Illinois agricultural economist Nick Paulson says the 2023 numbers include improved yields, lower prices, and updated crop insurance payment information.
Mostly bad news, I guess, in terms of revisions relative to where we were at in January. We've seen commodity prices sort of continue to come down. And we've got, a little bit more information now on how farmers marketed their new crop corn, in the end of 2023 for the 2023 crop. And so we saw that corn price for 2023 come down a bit, and the soybean price for 2023 come down a bit as well. So obviously that drops revenue. On the positive side, doesn't completely offset the price decline effect, but we do have crop insurance proceeds, crop insurance indemnity payments, or an estimate of those built in for 2023. Even those could still change a bit before we finalize.
The bottom line is that farmers on highly productive soils in central Illinois are likely to lose about $164 an acre for corn raised on their cash rented land last year, and $22 an acre for soybean. This year, the budgets currently project a $57 per acre loss on cash rented soybean acres. That's almost triple last year. However, the corn losses actually ticked back a bit from that $164 to $110. For University of Illinois Extension, I'm Todd Gleason.
A pipeline project may help Midwestern crops enter a new market. David Geiger has this report.
A huge portion of a carbon pipeline project takes a step forward. Its service will provide a public convenience and necessity, according to the 507-page decision from the Iowa Utilities Board, granting a process approval for Summit Carbon Solutions. CEO Lee Blank says there's plenty of work ahead. Still,
it's an early indication of the acceptance and what this project can actually mean to Iowa agriculture. So we're very pleased with the IUB's decision.
The board says it will require Summit to submit many revised exhibits before construction is allowed. Blank says the project is good for Iowa, which hosts the largest piece of the pipeline, a 688-mile segment across 29 counties, built for 18 million tons of CO2 and connected so far to 57 biorefineries capable of 16 million tons. And until carbon is better sequestered in the system, Midwest crops are not yet able to qualify for new markets like sustainable aviation fuel.
And so it's extremely important that the infrastructure project that we're working on gets accomplished. Otherwise, we'll be importing ethanol into the U.S. to service the sustainable aviation fuel market, which is a massive market, much larger than what the ethanol industry is supplying today.
Over double, in fact. The SAF market projected to be $40 billion worth. Overall, the status of the pipeline project continues to move. Summit has been through the hearing process and is waiting for an end-of-summer ruling in North Dakota on both pipeline construction and permits to sequester carbon. In South Dakota, they will soon refile for the permit process. So with the permit in Iowa, Blank says the next step.
We now will start focusing on the additional laterals that we added with the addition of Poet and Valero, which will be another administrative process for us to walk through, much like we just walked through on our baseline permit.
And as for concerns with 3.3 million miles of commodity pipelines across the country, Blank claims they are proven to be safe. Additionally, Summit is building new.
A state-of-the-art pipeline system that we can monitor and address in a much quicker and more proficient fashion than what's historically been built for commodity pipelines. So we feel very good about and say very firmly that we'll build the safest infrastructure pipeline system in the history of the country.
In Des Moines, Iowa, I'm David Geiger reporting.
Corn condition ratings have dropped yet again. Gary Crawford has more.
Despite improving growing conditions during the last few days of this past week,
corn condition declined.
USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey says the corn crop as we start this week is rated 67% good to excellent, 9% poor to very poor.
Both of those are 2-point deteriorations from the previous week.
The reason for the deterioration?
That is likely from the weather that happened the previous week. We're just seeing more signs of heat injury or flood damage.
Meanwhile, more of the crop is entering the delicate, all-important silking stage. 11% was silking as we started this week, well ahead of the 5-year average of about 6%. Gary Crawford reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
That's today's National Spotlight. Now here's the Livestock Report. A nationwide research effort continues in determining soil health and manure management within dairy operations and what that means from both economic and environmental perspectives. Here's Rod Bain.
It is year 4 of a 6-year collaboration in the realm of dairy crop production, resource conservation, and greenhouse gas reduction.
The Dairy Soil Water Regeneration Project is a collaboration with Dairy Management Incorporated, the Soil Health Institute, and different research institutions, including USDA, ARS.
Victor Green of Dairy Management Incorporated says contributing research facilities include 7 land-grant universities and USDA's Agricultural Research Station in Kimberly, Idaho, where scientist April Latham participates in this effort with a specific research project.
We've been using 2 different manure byproduct treatment polymers to condense the manure, make it easier to separate the solid manure fraction, which has more nutrients, hopefully, and another relies on mechanical vapor recompression, which dries the manure from a liquid stream into a solid product.
These products are being tested as soil amendments for crop fields to determine their impacts on yields and reduce greenhouse gases. The total research effort is coordinated by the Dairy Research Institute and funded in part by the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research and corporate supporters such as DMI, Nestle, and Starbucks. Green says the collaborative efforts are connected to the dairy industry's Net Zero initiative.
Specific goals of this initiative were to lower greenhouse gas emissions, improve soil health, and improve water quality and conservation.
Mara Cloutier of the Soil Health Institute notes each research project is unique in that
we have all these site partners across the U.S. and what we did was we built in experimental treatments that were regionally appropriate. The treatments that we're using in California might not be exactly the same treatments that we're using in Wisconsin because dairy farming just looks different there.
Yet are uniform in this manner.
We are using the same protocols across all of these site partner research stations to collect the data. All the soil data, the greenhouse gas emissions data, and the plant data, so yield and quality. So we can make these comparisons across the regions and identify regionally appropriate management systems for farmers to utilize.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Don't forget, if you've missed any of our morning shows or if you simply need to catch the news at a different time, you can subscribe to our podcast and have statewide agriculture news at your convenience. All you have to do is search for the AgNet News Hour on your favorite podcast downloading app. That's AgNet News Hour, and it's available wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Coming up in a few moments, we'll have today's This Land of Ours report, but first, more of the day's agriculture news. And with today's AgNet West headlines, here's Brian German.
Mandarins continue to be a strong offering for California growers. General Manager of Cobblestone Fruit, Colby Campbell, highlighted his optimism for the variety moving forward.
For me, I feel like as our population continues to grow and expand and kids, you have a large demand that's going to be there and a desire to be there. It's a healthy option and alternative to, a lot of, I feel like, items that are available today. And you've got, schools are putting them into their systems. And I think that's a great opportunity to get it in front of kids. So I feel like the California mandarin to me is still a strong, vibrant piece for the industry. I do see, the original Washington navels, still hanging in there, making a good, I'd say a little bit of a rebound, but I feel like the export market and the desire there's opportunity for that as well. So I think domestically you look at the mandarins, and export you look at a good Washington or a good late navel.
A recent study from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign and Cornell University examined how organic farmers' beliefs about soil microbiomes influence their farming practices. Researchers surveyed 85 organic vegetable farmers in New York about their microbiome beliefs, farming methods, and motivations, and also collected soil samples from their fields. The study found that 96% of farmers believe the microbiome affects plant defenses and pest control, but their beliefs about which practices support a healthy microbiome varied. Farmers who valued on-farm practices like no-till and cover cropping were more likely to adopt them. The study also revealed that farm size and farmer age influenced practice adoption, with larger farms less likely to use no-till methods. Future research will link soil microbiome changes to economic and belief data, which could lead to the development of market incentives. The U.S. Supreme Court has overturned the Chevron deference rule, which has guided federal regulation for 40 years. The rule, based on a 1984 case, allowed courts to defer to federal agencies' interpretations of ambiguous statutes. However, the Supreme Court now mandates that courts must independently determine if agencies act within their legal bounds. Organizations like the National Pork Producers Council and the American Farm Bureau Federation supported the change, arguing that Chevron deference gave too much power to unelected officials, leading to excessive regulations. They believe the ruling restores balance among government branches and ensures elected Congress members make laws. The Agricultural Retailers Association and the National Cattlemen's Beef Association also welcome the decision, noting it limits agencies' overreach and returns legislative authority to Congress. The ruling is seen as a significant shift in how regulations will be created and enforced, aiming for more clarity and accountability. Butter prices have been on a historic price trend in recent years. Senior dairy analyst with Rabo AgriFinance, Lucas Fees, said 2024 has started strong, but there are some concerns.
We've seen very firm consumer demand, and as a result, a lot of nervousness around end users around where prices might ultimately go. I think looking back in 2022, we hit a record high butter price. We exceeded that in 2023 and hit another all-time record high butter price. And so far, the butter price throughout the first half is the highest we've ever seen for the first half of the year. So a lot of nervousness around how this plays out into the remainder of the year. $3 per pound butter is almost unheard of, and it just represents a end user nervousness around overall supply availability as that demand continues to build.
The future of farming in California appears promising, as evidenced by the record attendance of more than 7,400 middle and high school students at this year's FFA Leadership Conference in Sacramento. The 4-day event offers extensive opportunities for students and features awards, educational workshops, networking, and a career expo. Executive Director of Development for the California FFA Foundation, Katie Otto, highlighted the growth in FFA membership, which surpassed 103,000 statewide. She also emphasized the vital role of high school ag teachers in inspiring students and fostering a pipeline of ag-related career paths. FFA's comprehensive education model includes classroom instruction, work-based learning, and leadership development. Otto expects FFA to continue growing with expanding programs in drone technology and agri-science as it approaches its centennial in 2028. I'm Brian German for AgNet West Radio Network.
Some food safety tips for your Independence Day cookout. That's coming up on This Land of Ours. Even if you follow all the rules for safely grilling meat and poultry for that July 4th cookout, you can still give food poisoning bacteria a chance to make people sick by ignoring one important post-cooking rule. Gary Crawford has details.
You are a grill master. You'll do everything right for that July 4th cookout using a food thermometer to make sure you cook the meat and poultry to an internal temperature hot enough to kill any bacteria. You will use a set of platters and utensils to handle raw meat and poultry, a different set for the cooked product to avoid cross-contamination. But there's still a way to mess things up, right?
Yep.
Yep. Meredith Carruthers, Agriculture Department food safety expert, says one of the biggest July 4th mistakes is leaving that grilled meat and poultry out for too long at the mercy of bacteria in the air or from people's hands or any place. 2 hours is the absolute longest you should leave it out.
Because that's a time frame where bacteria can then reach dangerous levels, and ultimately then if they reach those dangerous levels, they may not be able to be killed by reheating or cooking further or anything like that. So then you're kind of stuck with them.
And if the temperature is 90 degrees or above,
then that time frame actually bumps down to 1 hour.
So she says either put that food on ice or keep it very hot. Gary Crawford reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
You're listening to the AgNet News Hour. The national symbol of wildfire prevention and the public service campaign that created him reached the 80th anniversary mark in 2024. Rod Bain looks at some of the cultural and cumulative impacts of Smokey the Bear in this edition of Agriculture USA.
The icon of wildfire prevention efforts celebrates his 8th decade of service in 2024.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
And it has been a significant journey for Smokey Bear, the public service advertising campaign, and the character itself. From a record-setting length of service in presenting his message to
the U.S. Postal Service actually created Smokey's own zip code. Kind of shows the cultural height of popularity of Smokey.
I'm Rod Bain. Lincoln Bramwell of the U.S. Forest Service is among those joining us as we celebrate 80 years of Smokey Bear in this edition of Agriculture USA. A category of rarefied air. Those who have their own zip code within the United States. Any guesses who? The The President of the United States,
The U.S. president has an individual zip code.
shared with the First Lady the 20500 zip code. Santa Claus, while mail to Santa goes to the town of North Pole, Alaska, zip code 99705, St. Nicholas himself does not have an individual zip code. Only one other individual can claim to have their own U.S. zip code.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
The symbol of wildfire prevention himself, Smokey Bear. According to U.S. Forest Service historian Lincoln Bramwell, while around since 1944 as an advertising campaign cartoon character, it was the rescue of a black bear cub from a New Mexico wildfire in 1950 that morphed the character into a living symbol residing in the National Zoo in Washington, D.C.
That's when Smokey's popularity really sort of took off. A symbol you could visit and see with your own eyes if you visited the National Zoo in our nation's capital. From there, Smokey became so popular and started receiving fan mail, primarily from children, and whole classes would write Smokey care of the National Zoo that the U.S. Postal Service actually created Smokey's own zip code.
The living symbol Smokey died in 1976, succeeded by a cub adopted 5 years earlier, Little Smokey, who became the living symbol of the National Zoo until his passing in 1990. Smokey's zip code remained active until it was decommissioned in 1993. However, Smokey Bear's popularity with citizens remained so strong, letters continued to be sent via the zip code to the wildfire prevention bear. That led to the Forest Service and the U.S. Postal Service to reactivate Smokey's zip code in 2014. The 70th anniversary of Smokey's creation through the Joint Ad Council, Forest Service, National Association of State Foresters Public Service campaign. And while there was an interruption of sorts in Smokey's mail, there has been no such disruption in Smokey presenting his message to the American public.
It's pretty incredible to think about 80 years of a continuous public service announcement campaign.
That includes variations to that message over time. Perhaps the most significant occurred in 2001.
The formal message changed from only you can prevent forest fires to only you can prevent wildfires. And that was really done in recognition of how wildfires and fire events take place in sort of all kind of ecological conditions, not just tall standing forests that we think of. That was excluding all the other fuel types like grass fires and prairie fires.
80th anniversary celebrations are planned in various forms across the country in 2024. Recognition also comes in the way of a new public service advertising campaign for Smokey.
For decades, I've taught you everything I know, but I can only teach wildfire prevention.
A long-form social media video now available to honor Smokey, entitled Decades. The video also features the new voice of Smokey, actor Brian Tyree Henry. If you are unable to participate in upcoming 80th anniversary celebrations for Smokey Bear, you can always write a letter or send a postcard providing well wishes. Lincoln Bramwell, what is Smokey's zip code anyway?
20252.
You don't mind repeating that, do you?
20252.
Thank you very much, Lincoln. You can learn more about Smokey and wildfire prevention by going to his website, www.smokeybear.com. This has been Agriculture USA. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Most outdoor holiday grillers follow most of the recommended practices for food safety, but often miss one crucial step. Here's Gary Crawford.
This just can't be summer love, you see.
Ah, yes, summer love, and many of us love summer and summertime outdoor grilling.
I do all of the grilling in our house. It's like one of my favorite things to do in the summer.
Meet Meredith Carruthers, food safety expert with the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Meat and Poultry Hotline, the number of which we'll give you in a minute. She says they get calls all summer long from people wanting to make sure that they're doing all they can to grill things safely so nobody gets sick. Things like using a food thermometer to make sure meat and poultry items on the grill get up to the recommended minimum temperatures to kill any bacteria bacteria that may be in or on the items, using one set of utensils and platters to handle the raw meats going onto the grill, another set of clean utensils and platters to handle the cooked products, and making sure raw meats or their juices never touch any other food items that won't be cooked, such as salads and such. But Meredith says there are two very important things that many people are either ignoring or just don't realize how important they are in helping to keep people safe from food-related illnesses. Hand jive. Yes. Yes, you got the jive. It's our hands. And Meredith says in a cookout situation or anytime raw meat and poultry is involved, we need to be washing our hands a lot. And you know what? We don't do it. The USDA put dozens of people in test kitchens a while back, had them prepare a turkey burger and a salad, and they just watched everything they did.
97% of the time, people didn't either wash their hands at all or didn't do all 5 steps of hand washing for a full 20 seconds.
Oh, wow. Those test subjects were spreading bacteria all over everything. Now, this is a fact that most people don't know, but this next fact, very crucial for us cooking at home or on the grill.
Certain bacteria can live on surfaces for like 72 hours. So
3 days.
Think about it. You're making dinner. You've touched chicken, touched your spice containers without washing your hands. And then in the morning, you're cooking eggs and you want to use the same spice in your eggs or something. And then that gets all touched other places. So yeah, it's kind of crazy what your hands can move around.
Oh, yeah. And think about this. It's gross.
People, especially people my age, love using their phones for recipes nowadays. And you could be touching your phone with bacteria from a raw meat product and then not sanitizing your phone. And then, you just go on with your regular life, touching everything with your phone.
Ooh, so Meredith says we need to wash our hands before we start any food prep and immediately after we've touched any raw meat or poultry product or the juices from them. Hand washing can help prevent food poisoning, which can cause quite a lot of discomfort.
But it could also be as severe as causing death.
Questions on this or any food safety subject? Call the Meat and Poultry Hotline. Talk to an expert. The number, 1-888-MP-HOTLINE. 1-888-MP-HOTLINE. Gary Crawford reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
This is the AgNet News Hour. We will be back in just a moment with more agriculture news. You're listening to the AgNet News Hour. Unlike some other disasters, drought has a slow onset and a prolonged impact on health, agriculture, economies, energy, and the environment. An estimated 55 million people globally are affected by droughts every year, and as many as 700 million people are at risk of being displaced as a result of drought by 2030. In this edition of Water for Food podcast, DWFI Director of Communications and Public Relations, Frances Hayes, chats with experts in drought and health who shed light on this complex topic.
Hello, I'm Frances Hayes, DWFI Director of Communications and Public Relations, and your host for this episode of the Water for Food podcast. Today we'll be discussing the impacts of drought on human health, and I'm joined today by 4 experts in various areas of this important topic. Dr. Yanjin Guan is a DWFI faculty fellow and the director of biostatistics in the Water, Climate, and Health program at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. He'll discuss the impacts of drought on respiratory outcomes. Dr. Jesse Berman is an associate professor of environmental health sciences at the University of Minnesota School of Public Health. His expertise is the impact of drought on multiple health outcomes, including the stress levels of farmers. We'll also speak with Rachel Lookadoo, JD, and another DWFI faculty fellow who's also director of Public Health Policy in the Water, Climate, and Health program at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. We'll dive into her work on a drought and public health report developed through a partnership with NOAA and the University of Nebraska Medical Center. Dr. Jesse Bell, DWFI's Director of Water, Climate, and Health, also contributed to the report, and he'll bring a global perspective on the impacts of drought and health. Yanjin, Rachel, Jesse, and Jesse, I'm so happy to have you here and excited to have so many expert perspectives on this topic. So let's dive in. First, I'd like each of you to take a couple of minutes to introduce yourself and summarize your research and experience. So we'll start with you, Yanjin.
All right. So hello, everyone. My name is Youngjin. As Francis mentioned, I'm a faculty fellow at DWFI, and Director of Biostatistics at Water, Climate, and Health Program at UNMC. So I'm also faculty member in the Department of Biostatistics, and I'm deeply passionate about statistics with particular expertise in Bayesian statistics. So my primary goal is to develop innovative statistical method and to provide statistical solutions motivated by the real-world problems. So since joining the UNMC, I've collaborated with multiple researchers in clinical trials and the public health research. And one of my key research interests lies in environmental and spatial epidemiology and focusing on the health risk assessments associated with environmental and climate-related exposure.
Great, thank you. Jesse, let's move to you.
Thank you, Francis, and thanks for having me on the podcast today. So my name is Jesse Berman, and I'm an associate professor at the University of Minnesota School of Public Health. So I'm an environmental epidemiologist here, and for those who may not know, what is environmental epidemiology? So what we do is really understand how the environment impacts different disease outcomes. So environment can mean a lot of different things. It could mean the office that I'm sitting in right now. It could be the workplace that someone is, doing their job. It could mean the community where they live. Or for other people, it could be the environment, meaning the air and the water and the land and the soil that we're exposed to. So for my particular interest, I tend to focus on air pollution as well as extreme weather and climate conditions and how those impact health. Right now, today, when we're recording this on June 20th, there's a terrible heat wave that's impacting the entire eastern portion of the United States, stretching from the Great Lakes all the way up to Maine. This is a massive type of environmental exposure, and my research really focuses on how events like that, extreme heat, dust, drought conditions, and other types of pollutants and hazards impact human health.
Thank you. Rachel, you're next.
Thanks, Francis. So I'm Rachel Luckadoo. As Francis mentioned, I'm the Director of Public Health Policy for the Water, Climate, and Health Program, and I'm faculty within the Department of Environmental, Agricultural, and Occupational Health here at the College of Public Health and University of Nebraska Medical Center. I also serve as the Deputy Director of our Center for Preparedness and Emergency Response Solutions at UNMC. So my work focuses on public health and healthcare preparedness and response for all types of hazards, ranging from infectious diseases to natural disasters to extreme climate events like drought. And my background is also as an attorney, so I do look at some of the legal and policy issues that are involved in different preparedness issues as well. So thank you, Francis.
Thank you, Rachel. And last but not least, Jesse Bell.
Thanks, Francis. Really appreciate being on today. And so I'm Jesse Bell. I'm faculty at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. I'm also faculty at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. I'm the director of the Water, Climate, and Health Program, and I'm also director of Water, Climate, and Health at the Doherty Water for Food Global Institute.
You're listening to the AgNet News Hour. We continue now with this conversation on drought.
My primary focus or my interest is trying to understand how environmental change and climate change impacts human health. And I've been working on this for a number of years. My previous job was was between NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And today we're going to be talking about drought, and that's where I actually developed my interest at first. It was trying to understand, or one of my first interests was around drought and how it impacted human health. When I was working in those two institutions, we were working on climate and health assessment, trying to understand how climate change impacts human health, which we did a session or a podcast session on that health assessment, or one of the health assessments that's come out. And with that, I saw that there was a real need for information on understanding how drought impacts human health. And so that's been one of my main areas of focus over my career.
Thanks, Jesse. Well, it sounds like we have a lot of expertise in the virtual Zoom room today to discuss this topic. So that's fantastic. To set us up for this discussion, can you tell us a bit more about the greater impacts of drought that might not be top of mind to our audience? So what are some things that people kind of forget about when it comes to drought? And I'll just let whoever wants to jump in.
I'll chime in first, Francis. So when we think about natural disasters that impact health, the most common things that people think about are large, impactful events. So think about hurricanes, where you see on the news and in the newspaper, you'll see images of homes that are knocked over, or tornadoes, where you'll also have very visual impacts of things. And these types of large storms are very important for different health outcomes. But when we think about drought, they don't really have that same type of immediate impact. Instead, unlike a storm which comes through, is very severe, but then disappears in a day or even a few hours, droughts can last months or in some cases even years. And that makes them really hard to both evaluate as scientists, but also for the public to realize that this is impacting their health at a stage early enough to do something about it. Because by the time most people realize how severe a drought is, it's already been going on for quite some period of time. And that makes it hard to do interventions and mitigation on it. So coming from it from a health side and from a research side, that's one of the big challenges about drought, is this long time frame that it has, this lack of broad visibility, and the fact that drought can impact thousands, if not millions of people at a time, because they can span very large distances.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Jesse, that it's kind of hard to see those changes since they're so incremental, but over time they can really be impactful.
And I can jump in here as well. You know, when we talk about drought, a lot of times internationally, drought has come up as a human health impact because of famine and malnutrition. And it's estimated over the last century that drought has likely caused more deaths than any other climate or weather-related disaster. But when we were talking about drought in the context of the United States, we, as Jesse mentioned, as Dr. Berman mentioned, there hasn't been a lot of work on understanding some of those health impacts here in the US. And that's where some of the work that we've done collectively has been kind of at the forefront of science and try to understand some of these relationships between drought and human health, and especially in the context of the United States.
All right, thanks for that. Well, we'll keep moving on. So this next question I'd like to focus on respiratory issues surrounding drought. So Yanjin, how does drought specifically affect air quality? And what does this mean for respiratory health?
So first, let me talk with the association between the drought and respiratory health. So with the climate change and drought are happening more and more often and also keep on getting worse. So also globally, respiratory health caused an estimated 3.9 million deaths in 2017. It's representing is almost 7% of all deaths worldwide. So however, we don't know much about how drought specifically affects the respiratory health, and the number of studies is still sparse, especially in the United States. So to fill this gap, we conducted a national and climate region level study to evaluate the effect of a monthly drought exposure on respiratory health. So we used the data from National Center for Health Statistics, and then we found some interesting results. The first, we discovered the drought really do affect the respiratory health, but the impacts varies a lot depending on where you live in the United States. So for example, during the severe drought exposure, and respiratory mortality in the general populations went up by 6% in Northeast and 9% in Northern Rockies and Plain, where the Nebraska belongs to, and also around 5% in Ohio Valley and 3.5% in Southeast, and bump up to almost 16% in Upper Midwest.
That's today's top agriculture news. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. Thank you for sharing your morning with us.
To get more information on the topics you heard today, visit AgNet West online at agnetwest.com. You can also stay connected by following us on our social media at AgNet West on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also find our broadcast team of Brian German and Sabrina Halvorson on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for listening to the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. AgNet West Radio Network, your primary choice for agriculture news.